Dan and Melissa were heading to her sister Rachel's house for the evening to have a barbecue and to play some games. Rachel's boyfriend Alex had just bought a Nintendo Switch and thought it would be cool to have them over to test it out. "I heard they've got Mario Kart. I used to love playing that when I was younger," Melissa stated as they pulled up to the house. "Here we are, right on time," Dan announced as the car came to a stop. He did his usual routine of checking every compartment to make sure that he'd left nothing behind. The only reason he did this, of course, was so he could watch Melissa get out of the car and lock his eyes to any potential butt crack she'd show on the way out. Luckily for Dan, this strategy paid off as Melissa got up and, in doing so, exposed her crack to her adoring husband. "Oh, this is going to be a great night," Dan thought to himself. They walked up to the door and rang the doorbell. A very excited Rachel answered the door, hugged them both, and showed them in. Rachel's butt was a very similar shape to Melissa's, round and juicy. Either they both had great genes or they did a lot of squats together. Dan noticed that Rachel's pants were hanging a little low too, but given that Melissa had already flashed her crack, he was willing to settle for what he'd already seen and take any bonuses he could get. Rachel handed Dan and Melissa their drinks and started catching up with each other. Melissa chose to sit on a stool in the kitchen, and in doing so, inadvertently started flashing her butt again. 2 inches on show with Dan stood right behind her to take it all in. He glanced down and looked right down Melissa's pants, and all he could see was butt. Dan was pretty sure that she wasn't even wearing any underwear. "Hey, Dan, Alex is just setting up the barbecue. Do you want to come and help me get the drinks?" Rachel said, diverting the topic. Dan was nervous that she had asked him to help her because she had caught him perving at Melissa's ass crack and wanted to get him away. He had been caught red-handed staring at butt cracks before and had a feeling that he'd been caught again. "Yeah, okay, I'll help," Dan agreed as he followed Rachel out to the garage. The two made their way towards the fridge. "Okay, so we've got Stella, we've got Madri, and on the bottom row we've got... I can't remember what that is. Let's have a look." Rachel bent down to look at what was on the bottom shelf, and lo and behold, her butt crack was showing now too. 3 inches of butt crack in plain sight. Dan had known Rachel for 7 years, and this is the first time that he had ever seen her crack. He could barely contain his excitement. If Rachel had bought him into the garage to stop staring at butt cracks, it hadn't worked. She rooted around in there for about 20 seconds. Dan's eyes transfixed on her beautiful behind. "It's San Miguel. Will that be okay?" Rachel asked. Anything would be okay after that. Dan thought to himself. "Yeah, that'll be perfect." Dan and Rachel made their way back into the kitchen where Alex was now standing. Alex and Dan shook hands as they greeted each other. Dan gave Alex a knowing glance. "I've just seen your girlfriend's ass crack and you have no idea," Dan narrated in his brain. "I've got some bad news, guys, I'm afraid. Something's wrong with the barbecue and it won't light properly, so if it's okay with you guys, do you want to order pizza instead or something?" Everyone agreed and the pizzas were swiftly ordered. In the meantime, the 4 of them made their way into the living room to start playing games on the Nintendo Switch. Mario Kart was the first port of call, and it was going to lead to some very competitive playing. To start with, the 4 of them sat on the couch together, slumped back in the chairs as the first race began. However, as the race went on and got more intense, everyone started to lean forward. Everyone except Dan, that is. Melissa and Rachel were in a very intense battle for the win, and in doing so, had started to lean forward more and more. As they were doing so, their shirts were rising and their butt cracks began to show again. Alex was still blissfully unaware that his girlfriend was mooning everybody, but Dan was right on the ball and had decided to enjoy the view for the both of them. 4 races later, and they were both still showing some serious crack. Melissa had about half her ass on display, and Rachel wasn't far off. That was when Dan came up with an idea. "Hey ladies, why don't you challenge each other? You two have been the most competitive," he suggested. "Yeah, that sounds fun. You don't mind, do you, Alex?" Rachel replied. No, that sounds good. We can be your fans," Alex joked. "Why don't you sit on the carpet and do it?" Dan asked. "It'll probably make the controllers more responsive," he reasoned, hoping they'd take his advice so he could sit back and watch the 2 half moons on display. "Okay, we can do that," Melissa said. They both made their way to the carpet and sat down right in front of their men, half their ass cracks both still on display. Alex was stunned as this was his first sighting of the evening. He panicked, worrying that he would have to tell Rachel and that she would be embarrassed. He went to get up, but Dan preempted what he was about to do and stopped him. "What are you doing?" Dan whispered abruptly. "Her ass is hanging out, man. I need to tell her." Alex whispered back. No, dude. Just sit back and enjoy the view. How often do you get to see your partner's butt crack hanging out? It's an awesome treat that doesn't come around too often. You need to savor the moment. Dan's response seemed to partially convince Alex, but not fully. Are you seriously okay with half of your wife's butt crack showing? Doesn't she get mad that you didn't tell her? Alex debated. I tell her eventually. I just need to get my fill first. I'm an ass man. Butt cracks turn me on. The fact that I married a woman who shows butt crack every now and then makes me even luckier. Dan's passion began to resonate with Alex. Actually, Rachel's crack is kind of cute. Alex realized as he started to enjoy the show she was putting on for him. Melissa and Rachel played against each other for about half an hour, and at no point did they realize that their butt cracks were being idolized behind them. Dan and Alex were having the time of their lives, eyes glued to their partners' asses. I guess crack runs in the family, Dan joked to Alex. They both started laughing. At the end of the evening, they each said their goodbyes before Dan and Melissa left. Dan looked at Alex. Alex looked back, and they both gave each other a nod of appreciation. On the way back to the car, Melissa's shoelace came undone, and she bent down to tie it. Dan figured it was finally time to alert her to her wardrobe malfunction. Hey, honey, just to let you know, I can see your butt crack. In fact, I can see quite a lot of it. Melissa went red-faced but appreciated that Dan had told her. Oh God, it hasn't been showing all night, has it? No, God, no, of course not. I would have told you, silly. Dan reassured her despite the bare-faced lie. Melissa swiftly pulled up her pants and there would be no more crack for the rest of the night.